Okay, so now that we have found the 4 values for every activity, we are asked to find the slack of every activity, the slack time. Why this is important? Because slack time, what is slack time? It's the time that is available for an activity, and it's an extra time, right? It's a time that, for example, this activity can be delayed within that time and without affecting the project duration. This is very important, as we discussed earlier, for any project manager to know. So let's find the slack time for all the activities. Remember, the slack time, okay, it's equal to what? Slack time for any activity, it's equal to the late start minus the early start, or it's equal to, or late finish minus early finish. These should give you the same value, of course. Okay, so let's start from activity I here. You can see that it has a late finish equal to the early finish, and the same for late start and early start. So that means it has a slack of 0. Okay, now for activity H, it's not the same case here, because we can see that the late finish is different than the early finish, and the same for the late start and the early start, and their difference is 3, right? It's 24 minus 21. 24 minus 21, we get 3. For activity G, we can see that these both values are the same, so which means it has a slack equal to 0. For activity F, also these two values are the same, early start, late start, early finish and late finish, I'm sorry about that. Okay, these are the same, these are equal, which means the slack is 0. For activity E, also these, the early finish, late finish are the same, and also the early start, late start the same, so which means the slack is 0. For activity D, it's not the same case here, because late finish is 10 while early finish is 8, which means I have a slack of 2 weeks. And for activity C, I have a late finish of 12 while the early finish is 9. So what I'm saying here, I'm saying that C can finish at its earliest by week 9, but I can allow it to finish by week 12. You see, this is the notion of a slack. So it has a slack of 3 weeks. Now for activity B, we have here a high slack, because the difference between this and that is 6. So this is the high slack that we have in this project. For activity A, I have no slack, so it's 0. And of course, like everything for the virtual activity, everything is 0, including a slack. Okay, so now we have a slack for all the activities. And what do you notice? We can see easily, right, especially because this is a very simple PND, that we have a sequence of activities where all these have a 0 slack, right? They all have a 0 slack. What does it mean? That means I have found a path consisting of activities that all have 0 slack. What's that path? This is a critical path, right? And this complies with what we have found before. We have found before that path SAEFGI is our critical path. Okay, and this is another way, as explained to you earlier, when we have thousands of activities, softwares built in project management or project scheduling softwares, or the algorithms that are built in, they find these values and they can then easily recognize what are the critical path by finding path that consist of all activities with 0 slack. Okay. All right, finally, this is our last question in this problem. Here we're going to maybe learn something that you may not have learned enough in our lessons videos. I will come to that. But now we're going to use the slack time that we found in an earlier slide, okay, to answer questions like that, which are very realistic questions. So what are these questions? It says determine the change in the project duration when activity D is delayed by 3 weeks. This is a very realistic question, right? A project manager is meeting with the contractor who is assigned activity D, and he's telling him that I have problem in my machineries, or I have some shortage of resources, and my activity will be delayed. So the project manager wants to know what's the effect on the project. So what do? We look at activity D, okay, or the project manager will go and look at activity D, and he will see that this activity has a slack time of 2 weeks. What does it mean? Remember this is the definition of slack time. It's how much I can delay an activity without delaying the whole project. So I can see that the slack time is less than the delay that will happen, which means what? Which means with a delay of 3 weeks for activity D, the project will be delayed not by 3 weeks, but by 1 week, right? 3 minus 2. So I have used my 2 weeks of slack time, but I have used one more, which I don't have any more slack time. So the project will be delayed by 1 week. If you want to verify that, what's happening, look at this. Activity D, let's say it started at its earliest start, okay? Now, instead of taking 3 weeks, now it took 6 weeks, which means it will finish at its earliest by 5 plus 6, 11. So instead of 8, now it's 11. What does it mean? Look, before we had the early start of G equal to 10. How did we get that? That was the early finish of F of 10, and it was higher than the earliest finish of D, which was 8, and that's why the earliest start here was 10. But now that the earliest finish of D is 11, now G cannot start anymore on 10, right? It will start only on 11. Then 11 plus 14, nothing is happening here. Okay, there's no delay in G itself. What happens for G, it's delayed to start because of what happened in D. So 11 plus 14, that would be then 25. You see, everything is happening because of the delay in D itself. And then this 25, which means that activity I cannot start by 24 anymore. This will be 25, right? And 25 plus 2, that will be 27. And here we go. That's a 1 week delay as we expected. You see, all that I have done, all these calculations in red that I have done, you don't have to do it. All what you have to do to answer this question, you will check what's the delay, 3 weeks, the slack time is 2, so the delay in the project duration will be 1 week. That's it. You don't have to do what I have done. But I just wanted to show you really what's happening. Okay, let's answer another question. What happens to the project when activity C is delayed by 3 weeks? Okay, now activity C delayed by 3 weeks. We go to activity C and we see that it has a slack time of 3 weeks. So there's no problem at all, right? Because I'm delaying activity C exactly by the slack time, so nothing will happen. Again, let's verify. So 5, but instead of taking 4 weeks, it's delayed by 3 weeks, so it will take 7 weeks. So 5 plus 7, that's 12, which means this becomes 12, which means this becomes 24, right? And let me just erase what I have written before. Before, here we go. that was from on my previous calculations. And now, so 24, sorry, I did not take it out. Where were we? Here, yes, so 24, and which means that activity I can still start by week 24, which means there is no delay at all, right? As we expected by simply comparing the delay by the slack time. So that's our answer here. Now, the third one, what happens to the project when both activities C and H are delayed by 3 weeks? Okay, so both C and H. Now, I need to clean up here because I'm sure you are very, very confused now. Okay, let me take it out. Okay. Okay. Great. So both activities C and H are delayed. Okay, C has a slack time of 3 and H has a slack time of 3. Now remember we discussed a concept before that. The 3 weeks of slack time here and this one, they do not sum up. That means we cannot allow C to be delayed by 3 weeks and H by 3 weeks. This 3 weeks of slack time, this is what we call, remember, a shared slack. It's a shared slack between activity C and H, which means if activity C used 1 week, what's remaining for H is 2 weeks. If activity C used 3, nothing will be remained for H. So that means that when both activities are delayed by 3 weeks, okay, my project will be delayed by 3 weeks. And here we go. Finally, what happens if both activities B and H, okay, are delayed by 3 weeks? So we look at activity B, we see that it has a slack time of 6, and activity H has a slack time of 3, which means activities B and H share a slack of what? Share a slack of 3. Okay, so activity B, the 6 here, has a shared slack which is 3 with H, and it has 3 on its own. So if both activities B and H are delayed by 3 weeks, so I can say that the 3 or B has used its own slack time, which means what's remaining from the shared is all of it, which is 3. Now I can allow H to use all that shared slack time. So here we go. And there will be no delay in the project duration. Okay, so I hope these calculations were clear and they have reinforced what you have already learned in our lessons videos. So now we'll go and start practice problem number 2.